On World News tonight, the flu season is here in a big way, earlier and more destructive. And in some places, there's a shortage of vaccine. The U.S. attorney prosecuting a rap artist for selling drugs. Someone executed him. President Bush reverses himself and lifts the tariffs on foreign steel. And why you will pay less for toys this Christmas. It is the Walmart factor.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin tonight with an urgent public health problem. There are several aspects to this year's flu season that have health officials worried. It has come earlier, it is spreading more quickly than usual, and there is a significant shortage of flu vaccine in certain places. It comes as a stark reminder of how potent flu can be, to recall that in an average year, 36,000 people die from flu. ABC's Bill Redeker has our first report tonight from Colorado.
They're both under the weather, big time.
Colorado is at the center of this year's widespread eruption of the flu. More than 6,300 cases have been reported as of today. There have been 5 fatalities, all of them children.
The numbers of people with flu reported to the state today are more than the combined numbers we had in the last 2 years.
And Colorado state health officials say the worst is yet to come.
It's going to increase over the next couple of weeks before we peak.
At the current rate, doctors say across the nation, the flu could claim twice as many victims as usual. Researchers at the Mayo Clinic estimate as many as 70,000 Americans could die during this flu season. The Centers for Disease Control report widespread outbreaks in 10 states, from Pennsylvania to Washington. In Texas, health officials say a dozen monitoring sites have reported unprecedented flu activity. In Seattle, there are as many cases now as all of last year.
A lot of people haven't got their flu shots yet. They're not protected, and they weren't ready.
In some states, there are shortages of vaccine. Health officials in Wyoming say they have run out. Doctors in Nebraska say they only have enough until Monday. The nation's largest vaccine supplier says it has shipped nearly everything it has, and it takes 4 months to manufacture more. But the government says no one should panic.
It may mean that people have to shop around a little more to find vaccine because, as in every year, vaccine supplies are pretty well distributed by this time of the year.
One more problem, the vaccine does not directly target one strain of this year's virus that is causing so much concern. And the peak flu season is still weeks away. Bill Redeker, ABC News, Denver.
A couple of questions for our medical editor, Dr. Tim Johnson, who joins us from Boston this evening. Tim, how much good does a flu shot do?
Well, in about 70 to 80% of young, healthy people, it prevents getting the flu if you're exposed to it, somewhat less so in elderly people. But it's very helpful in preventing getting the flu and or its serious complications.
Therefore, should everyone have one?
The official recommendations are for everyone over age 50, anyone at any age with serious chronic disease, and this year for the first time, kids between 6 months and 2 years. But pediatricians are starting to give it to kids who are older so they don't expose their younger siblings. And I personally think that everyone should consider getting it. I got mine this afternoon.
Why kids for the first time this year?
Well, because we've learned that young children are very vulnerable to the effects of the flu, much as elderly people are. And so they're pushing it, as I said, this year for the first time, officially. And next year, I think we're going to have it even lowered and include more kids in the official recommendation.
Finally, in a phrase, is this a real scare?
In some states it is, and every expert that we have talked to predicts this is going to be the most serious flu season we've had for many years.
Thank you, Tim. Tim Johnson in Boston tonight. Other news today, the president reversed himself and scrapped the tariffs he had imposed on foreign steel imports. The tariffs were popular in steel-producing states that Mr. Bush wants to carry in the next election. What is still not clear is whether the tariffs help the U.S. economy. Here's ABC's Terry Moran.
And we got a good discussion.
The president portrayed his about face as a matter of principle.
America's consumers, the American economy is better off with a world that trades freely and a world that trades fairly.
Mr. Bush's steel tariffs, which slapped new duties of up to 30% on imported steel, were the most protectionist action by an American president in decades. They were supposed to last for 3 years, but today, 21 months later, administration officials claimed it was time to lift the tariffs because they had worked, by giving the industry some breathing room to restructure itself.
When you look at the consolidation, the labor contracts that are placed now, the lower production costs, you see that we now have an industry, once again, that is globally competitive.
But there was another reason for the reversal: fears of retaliation from other countries. Europeans and others have threatened to impose tariffs of their own on products from politically crucial states, such as Florida citrus products and Michigan manufactured goods. Analysts say the administration caved in to that pressure.
Well, I think it really concentrated the mind of the administration, because if the tariffs had not been lifted this week, then next week we'd be in a trade war. There is also a sharp controversy over whether the tariffs helped or hurt the U.S. economy. A government study found that tariffs actually cost about $30 million to the total economy. More important, the higher steel prices spurred job losses in other industries that use steel. By some estimates, 20,000 to 40,000 workers lost jobs because of the tariffs. In Pennsylvania today, the people who make steel were not happy.
He just threw a big blow to the steel industry, and I hope he knows what he's doing.
That's a question Democrats will be sure to raise here next year. Terry Moran, ABC News, the White House.
Overseas today, the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, spent part of it in Afghanistan, where he almost experienced the country's violence and instability firsthand. As he was leaving Kabul, the capital, someone fired rockets at the U.S. Embassy. Here's ABC's Martha Raddatz.
The rocket struck near the U.S. Embassy just hours after Secretary Rumsfeld left. His trip to Kabul was supposed to be kept secret until after his arrival, but with his lengthy motorcade, it would not have been hard for anyone to figure out that a high-ranking official was in town. Earlier in the day, Rumsfeld was in northern Afghanistan meeting with two of the main warlords who helped the U.S. defeat the Taliban, but since have refused to disarm and have repeatedly fought one another. Secretary Rumsfeld said today he was assured by both men that they would keep their promise to turn in heavy weapons.
We're pleased that they have agreed to do so, and we're pleased that they've initiated it.
The weapons would be handed over to the British, who run an 80-member reconstruction team in northern Afghanistan. There are 6 such teams in Afghanistan, the majority run by the Americans. What the U.S. is hoping is that eventually these small reconstruction teams will be operating all over Afghanistan, primarily to provide security. Security remains a serious problem in Afghanistan. More than 400 people have been killed here since August, including U.S. troops, aid workers, and Afghan soldiers. The worst violence has been along the Pakistani border, where Taliban and al-Qaeda forces are believed to be regrouping. A small contingent of U.S. forces has almost daily clashes with the enemy. Today, Secretary Rumsfeld and Afghan leader Hamid Karzai said they did not think the violence would disrupt national elections scheduled for June.
The Taliban, terrorism, whoever they are, will not be able to disrupt the process.
But President Karzai has little control outside of Kabul. Martha Raddatz, ABC News, Kabul.
The Secretary of State, Colin Powell, was also overseas today, but he had Afghanistan on his mind. He was at the NATO alliance headquarters in Brussels, and he asked the alliance to consider playing a larger role in Afghanistan's security and reconstruction. In Iraq today, there was another attack on a police station, this time in the town of Ramadi. 6 people were injured when someone fired rockets at the building just as police officers were gathering to get their monthly salaries. We also learned a few more details today about the president's surprise visit to Baghdad. The White House disclosed that Air Force One flew under a flight plan that misidentified it as a Gulfstream 5, a jet much smaller than the 747 Mr. Bush used. The White House said this was part of the ruse. And that picture-perfect Thanksgiving turkey Mr. Bush was photographed holding, the White House confirmed a report in the Washington Post that it was a cafeteria decoration. Officials said they did not know that Mr. Bush would pick it up. When we come back this evening, a prosecutor is murdered in the middle of a major trial about drug dealing. Salmon baby food and other projects the government is about to fund. It is your money. And the shipwreck that will make some treasure hunters very, very wealthy.